You're not weak. But somewhere between who you were 5 years ago and who you are right now, something got quieter inside you. Not broken, not finished, just quieter. You still show up. You still do the work. But there's a version of you that used to stand in the middle of chaos and feel solid. And lately, you can't quite find that person. Here's the uncomfortable question nobody's asking you. What if the thing that's making you mentally fragile isn't your circumstances, but the rules you've been using to interpret them? Because the Stoics, a group of men who faced exile, slavery, war, and execution, didn't build mental strength by having fewer problems. They built it by thinking differently about all of them. And today, you're going to get 10 of those exact lessons, not as philosophy, as tools. Let's start with the one that will immediately make everything feel different. Lesson 1. The dichotomy of control isn't what you think. Heck, everyone has heard this one. Control what you can control. It's on coffee mugs. It's in motivational reels. You've probably said it to someone else. But here's what nobody tells you. Most people use that phrase to avoid pain, not to process it. They say, control what you can control, right before they scroll for 45 minutes, binge something they don't care about, or pick a fight with someone they love. They're not practicing Stoicism. They're using Stoic language to escape. The real teaching from Epictetus is sharper than a bumper sticker. He said there are two categories in life: things that are up to us, our judgments, our intentions, our responses, and things that are not up to us, everything else. The body, reputation, other people's decisions, outcomes. The practice isn't passive, it's surgical. Here's what it looks like in real life. You're up for a promotion at work. You've done everything right. You prepared, you delivered, you showed up, and someone else gets it. Most people collapse inward at that moment. They replay the decision. They question their worth. They quietly let it change how they work. Less effort, more resentment. The Stoic response is not to pretend it doesn't hurt. It's to ask one precise question. What was actually up to me in this situation? Your preparation, your attitude, your quality of work. Those were yours. The decision, the politics, the timing, not yours. You gave 100% to what you owned, and 0% of the outcome was yours to control. That's not consolation, that's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of strength, not the end of it. But controlling your mind is only useful if you're directing it toward the right things. Which brings us to the second lesson, and it's the one people fight hardest against. Lesson 2, your opinion of the event. Art is the event. Marcus Aurelius wrote this in his journal, not for publication, not for posterity, for himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Now sit with that for a second. Not inspiration, instruction. Because what Marcus is really saying is this: the thing that's hurting you right now is not the event itself. It's the story you've constructed around it. Someone disrespects you in a meeting. The event. A comment was made. The story your mind adds. I'm not respected. I don't matter. I should have said something. Why didn't I say something? The event lasts 3 seconds. The story lasts 3 days. Pattern interrupt. Ask yourself this: when's the last time something happened to you and the actual moment was fine, but your thinking about it afterward took you down? That's not weakness. That's what an untrained mind does. It narrates, it catastrophizes, it time travels. The Stoic practice isn't to feel nothing. It's to interrogate the narrative before it becomes law. Here's a concrete practice Marcus used himself. He called it objective description. Before reacting to any event, strip away all the language that carries emotional charge and describe only what factually occurred. Not, "My friend ignored me at that gathering and it was humiliating," but, "I spoke. He did not respond. I moved on." Same event, different weight. You don't have to pretend it didn't sting. You just stop letting the sting write the whole chapter. This isn't suppression. This is the difference between a man who responds and a man who reacts. And learning to respond instead of react is critical. But there's a deeper level to this, because the strongest people aren't just calm under pressure. They've actually learned to use the pressure. Lesson 3. The obstacle isn't in the way. It is the way. This is the one that changes careers, marriages, the way you grieve. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Ryan Holiday turned that line into a best-selling book, but the feeling of that principle is something most people only encounter in their worst moments, and then forget when things get easier. Let me give it to you straight. Difficulty is not a detour from your development. It is your development. Every time you encounter an obstacle, a job loss, a relationship ending, a health scare, a betrayal, there are two options available to you in that moment. Option 1, you treat the obstacle as evidence that life is working against you. Option 2, you treat the obstacle as the exact material you need to build what you're trying to become. Real life scenario. A man in his late 30s gets laid off. He had a plan. The plan is gone. He has a family, a mortgage, and a timeline that's now irrelevant. The man who treats this as catastrophe sits in it. He tells himself a story about what he's lost. He delays. He waits to feel ready. 6 months later, he's taken the safest possible next step, chosen not from vision, but from fear. The man who's learned this lesson asks a different question. What does this obstacle make possible that wasn't possible before? Maybe it's the business he never started, the pivot he kept telling himself someday, the relationship with his kids that was always losing to his schedule. The obstacle doesn't disappear, but its meaning changes, and changed meaning changes action. That's not positivity. That's strategy. But here's what none of this works without, and most people never develop it. Lesson 4, memento mori. The practice nobody wants, but everyone needs. The Stoics did something that would make most modern people deeply uncomfortable. They thought about death, deliberately, regularly, on purpose, not in a morbid, spiral into the darkness kind of way. Strategically. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the deaths of great emperors before him and noted that even their names are mostly forgotten. Epictetus reminded his students that the body you've been given is temporary, on loan, not owned. Seneca, in his letters, returned to this theme again and again. Time is the one resource you cannot recover. Now, before you scroll past this idea because it feels heavy, stay with me for 10 more seconds. Because here's what happens when you actually sit with your mortality, even for a moment. The things that have been eating your attention start to look different. Think about this. The argument you've been replaying for 2 weeks. Does it still feel that important when you put it next to the fact that you won't be here forever? The opportunity you've been too scared to take, does the fear stay the same size when you remember that the window closes? The relationship you've been meaning to repair, who's waiting for what exactly? Memento mori isn't designed to depress you. It's designed to clarify you. Seneca wrote, "It is not that I'm brave enough to face death. It's that thinking about death makes me brave enough to face life." That's the whole thing right there. And the man who understands his finitude stops wasting energy on things that don't survive honest reflection. He gets quiet. He gets focused. He gets free. But being free isn't the same as being invincible. There's one more dimension to mental strength that most Stoic content skips entirely, because it's the hardest one to talk about. Lesson 5. Amor fati. Stop tolerating your life. Start wanting it. There's a difference between accepting your life and loving it. Most people who've read a few Stoic books have learned acceptance. They've learned to nod at what they can't control. They've learned to not complain out loud as much. But acceptance at its weakest is just gritted teeth with better posture. The Stoics, and particularly Marcus, pointed at something far more radical. Amor fati, love of fate. Not, this happened and I'll deal with it. But, this happened and I want it to have happened because it's mine, it's real, and it has something to build in me. This is the hardest principle in all of Stoicism, because it asks you not just to stop fighting reality, but to actively embrace it. Here's where it gets personal. Think about the hardest year of your life, the year you'd most want to remove from your timeline if you could. Now think about who you became on the other side of it. Would you be the same person without that year? Would you have the same clarity, the same priorities, the same depth, without that specific weight? For most honest people, the answer is no. Amor fati doesn't ask you to lie and say the hard thing was good. It asks you to go further than acceptance, to actually want the full experience of your own life, including the parts that cost you something. Because a man who only wants the good years is a man who's always half at war with his own existence. A man who can say, I wanted all of it, even the hard part, is a man who cannot be destabilized. That is not something you perform. That is something you build, slowly, honestly, through each of the lessons we've been talking about. We're halfway through. But I want to pause here and say something directly. If you've been watching this and recognizing yourself, not in some comfortable, motivational way, but in an honest, this is actually about me kind of way, then you're exactly who this channel is built for. Stoic Mindshift exists for the man who's done with surface-level content and ready to think at a different level. If that's you, subscribe now. Not for the algorithm, but because what we do here takes time to build and you don't want to miss what's coming. Now, back to the work. Lesson 6. You are not your emotions, but you can't ignore them either. Here's a mistake a lot of people make when they first encounter Stoicism. They think the goal is to eliminate emotion, to become a stone, to feel less. That's not Stoicism. That's just numbness with a philosophy attached. The Stoics made a sharp distinction between two kinds of emotional states. Passions, which are irrational, disproportionate, and judgment-based, and good emotions, which are rational responses that accompany a clear mind. Fear of something outside your control. Passion. Appropriate caution about a genuine risk. Good emotion. Rage at disrespect. Passion. Measured anger in response to actual injustice. That's different. The practice is not about turning off your emotional life. It's about not letting it drive when it shouldn't be in the driver's seat. Real scenario. You get a message that makes your chest tight. Immediately, your body is ready to fire back. Fingers moving before the thought is finished. Most people send the message. The Stoic practice is this. Name what you're feeling before you respond. Not, I'm angry. More specific than that. I feel disrespected. I feel embarrassed. I feel afraid of what this means. Naming it precisely does something neurological. It takes the emotion from the reactive part of your brain and gives it a fraction of space, enough space to choose a response instead of delivering a reaction. That fraction of space is where your character lives. And protecting your character is not separate from mental strength. It is mental strength. Lesson 7. The discipline of desire. Stop wanting. What's destroying your focus? Epictetus said something that sounds simple until you really sit with it. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. In plain language, the suffering you're carrying right now is almost entirely made of the gap between what is and what you want to be. That gap is real. But most people never interrogate what they actually want, and whether those wants are serving them or consuming them. Here's the sharper question. How many things are you currently pursuing that, if you got them, would only reset the goalpost? The raise that becomes the next raise. The body goal that becomes a harder body goal. The relationship milestone that reveals the next thing that's missing. This isn't an argument against ambition. The Stoics were not passive people. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire. Seneca was one of the most prolific writers of his age. Epictetus taught hundreds of students. But they had a discipline around desire. They pursued intentionally, not reactively. The man who wants everything is controlled by everything. The man who wants only what aligns with his values is controlled by no one. Before this lesson settles, because the next one is about the one person most people never train their focus on. Lesson 8. The inner citadel. The one place no one can touch. Marcus Aurelius had a concept he returned to repeatedly throughout his private journals. He called it the inner citadel. The idea is this: there is a place inside you, a space of judgment, intention, and will, that no external force can enter without your permission. Your reputation can be attacked, your body can be harmed, your plans can be destroyed, your relationships can fall apart. But the citadel, the place where you decide what things mean, where you choose your response, where your character actually lives, that place is yours alone, and most men don't even know it exists, let alone live from it. Here's what that looks like in practice. Someone publicly humiliates you, on social media, at work, in front of people whose opinion matters to you. The outer world reacts. You feel the flush of shame, the heat of embarrassment. That's real. And the Stoics never denied it. But then, if you've built the citadel, something kicks in underneath that response. A stillness. A place that says, I know who I am. This moment does not define me. My response will. That's not arrogance. That's the result of having spent time building your inner life so that it can hold weight when the outer world applies pressure. And you build it the same way you build anything. One honest choice at a time, in moments that are smaller than this one. The citadel isn't constructed in a crisis. It's maintained in the ordinary. And the ordinary moment that builds it most people are asleep to it. Lesson 9. The view from above. Zoom out before you break down. Marcus Aurelius had a practice of mentally zooming out on his own problems. When something felt overwhelming, he would picture himself from above, then from further above, then from the vantage point of history, then from the vantage point of the cosmos. A man anxious about tomorrow, viewed from a century out, a small moment in a life that is itself a small moment in history. This is not minimization, it's proportion. Because so much of what breaks people's focus, ruins their sleep, and consumes their energy, when held against even a 5-year lens, barely survives the zoom. Concrete practice. Next time something threatens to destabilize you, Run it through 3 questions. 1. Will this matter in 1 week? 2. Will this matter in 1 year? 3. Does this change who I fundamentally want to be? If the answer to all 3 is no, and it usually is, you've just saved yourself days of mental noise. If the answer to the 3rd question is yes, you've just identified something worth your full attention. That's the filter. That's how a Stoic decides what deserves the weight of his focus. And that brings us to the final lesson. The one that holds everything else together. And the one most people only reach after they've lost something they couldn't afford to lose. Lesson 10. Becoming the person who doesn't need the crisis to wake up. Every lesson we've covered today exists on a spectrum. You can understand the dichotomy of control, or you can live it. You can know that your opinion creates your suffering, or you can catch yourself adding the story and choose to stop. You can have heard of memento mori, or it can actually change what you say yes to this week. There's a version of Stoicism that lives in quotes and notebooks and podcast discussions. And there's a version that changes how you walk into a room, how you hold a conversation, how you handle the moment when everything you planned falls apart in real time. The difference between those 2 versions is practice, repetition, the quiet daily decision to apply the philosophy, not when it's comfortable, but when it's inconvenient. Here's the honest truth. Most people only reach for Stoicism when they're in crisis. When the relationship ends, when the diagnosis comes, when the money runs out. And the philosophy works in those moments. It's been tested in far worse. But the man who starts practicing now, not in crisis, but in the ordinary friction of a regular week, he's building something different. He's building a version of himself that doesn't need the crisis to wake him up. He's the man who was already calm before it got hard, already clear before it got confusing, already grounded before the floor disappeared. That man is not born. He's not lucky. He's not wired differently. He's practiced. And the practice is available to you right now. Not after you've suffered enough. Not after you've read enough. Not after conditions improve. Now, in this week. In the decisions that feel too small to matter, that are actually the only ones that do. If something in this video touched a nerve, if one of those 10 lessons landed in a way that felt personal rather than general, that's not an accident. That's the difference between philosophy as content and philosophy as a mirror. Stoic mind shift isn't built for people looking for motivation. Motivation fades. It's built for people looking to think differently, permanently. If that's you, subscribe. Not for the numbers. Because the next video continues this work, and you don't want to come back to this channel halfway through a season of your life when you could have started at the beginning. Hit the bell. Share this with one person you think is ready to hear it. And if there's a specific Stoic lesson or topic you want me to go deeper on, drop it in the comments. I read them. I build from them. See you in the next one.